welcome back, everyone. Some big stuff happening right now with the rail lines, just in time for Christmas, unfortunately. But it's going to be interesting how this is playing out. Basically, we might have a rail strike. And anyone who's read Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged will know what that could possibly mean. It's kind of like the industry that holds up the sky suddenly shrugs its shoulders, and just like Atlas and in Greek mythology, the whole sky can come down a little bit. America is facing a crisis like this right now, and it's happening right alongside the diesel crisis, which maybe I'll go into tomorrow. On that note, briefly, Biden's been basically opening things up, so it looks like the crisis is averted, but high costs are here. They're facing, regardless of that, though, the whole breaking down of the American logistics system. Part of this is being caused by, well, we'll get into it. The point is, though, we're kind of entering this Atlas Shrugged-like scenario, and I'm laughing out of concern more, but it's not a good thing. At the same time, too, it looks like the Biden administration is going to do something very, very interesting, which is they might go against the unions, and they might take congressional action to prevent an actual general strike from taking place, which they can do. In the process of doing that, if they do that, and they're suggesting they will, they're going to really, really anger the unions. And remember, the unions tend to vote heavy Democrats. So this is it's a very difficult place for them right now. I'll explain what's going on with that. I also want to go pretty in depth today about what's happening with Elon Musk and Twitter, because for those of you who've been watching what's happening on Twitter, and I think a lot of people haven't, because I've been watching the numbers there. It looks like it's bouncing back. The numbers, I don't know if it is, to be honest. I don't think it is fully. But regardless of that, you have a very interesting debate right now happening over what freedom looks like, what freedom of speech looks like. And Elon Musk is taking on a lot of the major industries. The significance of what's happening on Twitter is not related to Twitter, in my opinion. It's begun more of a cultural discussion on free speech, whether people should have the rights to free speech, and also it's exposing some of the real crazy problems you have with big business and government tied to big business, not just the censorship establishment as it existed between government telling basically platforms to censor. Does that constitute government censorship? But even further than that, the issue of, for example, there was apparently a lot of child pornography on Twitter. Musk has been getting rid of that. And funny enough, a lot of those accounts were apparently tied to Antifa, the terrorist group that talks about, attacking conservatives. A lot of the accounts were Antifa accounts, and they're getting deplatformed. It's extremely interesting, and there's some other big stuff happening. It's going to be a very interesting show today, folks, so stick around for it. That said, we actually are, I assume a lot of people are watching right now, we're premiering right now our new documentary about the Shadow Party, the Shadow State. It's about ESG, environmental social governance, so be sure to watch that documentary today. I'm not personally involved in that one, but I've been helping a bit behind the scenes, just getting things rolling and stuff. Don't miss it. It's called The Shadow State. It's premiering right now, and I assume a lot of folks are actually watching it right now. Maybe they'll come back and watch this show later. All right. That said, folks, let's get started. Real quick, those of you on YouTube, we will jump over to Epic TV after about 25 minutes, so stick around for that. Come join us. There's a lot of great content here, and by joining us, you also help the show keep going. It's very much appreciated, and you get to have great uncensored conversations. It's fantastic. Why aren't you here? Come on. All right, that said, let's jump into the stories for today. I want to start right now with the rail strike, because I kind of weighed on whether we should lead with the story, because I don't think it's gotten the attention or, frankly, care from the general public that it deserves, in my opinion. This is not only important in terms of just getting your packages in time for Christmas. This is important because it's the food shipments, it's tying into all the other crises we're facing right now. And most of all, it ties into kind of one of the pillars, especially of the Democrat Party more so, which is the unions, and how government can override the unions, and even ties into some interesting anecdotes about I think economics in general. Ayn Rand specifically chose the rail industry as an example of what a general strike could look like in her book Atlas Shrugged, which it's very interesting. Let's start from the top, though. I want to show you Daily Wire first. It says rail workers strike looming. I just want to lay out kind of what's going on right now. It says rail worker unions are threatening to strike again in a move that could trigger a shutdown that would cost the U.S. economy an estimated $2 billion with a B per day. It's like that's like a Ukraine war package every week. If you think about the amount of money that would cost the U.S. economy. In a statement earlier this month, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way employees said, quote, "This is the railroad's last chance to do the right thing by voluntarily agreeing to provide paid sick leave to all employees." They want, I think, 14 days. The union is requesting 1 penny on every dollar of profit to be directed towards paid sick leave for workers. If the demand is not met, the statement warns that the railroads, quote, "will be responsible for the imposition of a shutdown of their operations and the economic harms to its customers, the country's economic supply chain, and the entire U.S. economy." And they're right. A general strike in the rail industry would not just be the difficulty of finding transportation, maybe. I know a lot of people on the East Coast, I don't know about the West Coast so much, but on the East Coast, a lot of people take the train when they go between, for example, Washington and New York, or they want to travel upstate or go to Boston. It's very common to take the train, and people who have family in other states often take the train to visit those family. If the rail lines go down, it's going to be very hard to visit family. You're going to have to either drive, if you don't have a car, like you're in New York, a lot of people don't. You have to maybe grab an Uber, like $200 Uber or something like that, or you have to fly. And the system could not handle the additional number of people, basically. I know, for example, I work in New York, but my dad is in, central New Jersey, and so I have to take the train to visit him. It'll be very difficult traveling for the holidays. Aside from that, though, the other problem is shipping. And we do think of, for example, your Amazon gifts getting delivered or whatever else you're buying getting delivered. It goes beyond that to include even food shipments and so on, fertilizer, the whole 9 yards of what the American logistics system entails. And it's unclear how long a strike would last. But basically, the unions have a gun to the head of the American system, of the American economic system, right ahead of the holidays. And I have mixed feelings about unions. I think I have mixed feelings about them. I think that traditionally they did have an important role to play. I think some of them have become a little too much like government agencies in terms of how they operate. And regardless of that, though, they do have their valid points, and the government has its valid points. It's a complicated situation, but let me go deeper into this. Now, the rail union was actually given an offer. So the Biden administration essentially did give them an offer. It was brokered by the Biden administration. I'm not just saying that in general. But the unions rejected the offer. So the first attempts at negotiations have failed. And basically, we're at a point now where the Biden administration is saying, we're not going to break any, we offered you a pretty good, offer, and you didn't take it. The unions are saying, well, it didn't cover the main things we're concerned about. The unions, I get where they're coming from, and it's pretty valid. Basically, they're overworked. They're understaffed. People are getting sick because of COVID and whatever else, and also because they're being worked like, mules, essentially. It's not a healthy lifestyle for them. They want more sick leave, and they want to be paid when they have that sick leave. It's an understandable argument. Because of the way the industries have gone, a lot more pressure is on them. And also because, we expect to have 1 day shipment, which when I was a kid was like unheard of. I remember when I was a kid, I was into Star Wars, I was a, early, pre-teen and so on, right? Buying models from like catalogs, and it was like, it would take like a month. It would take like a month to get the package, because you have to mail it in, and then after you mail in the letter and the check, they have to send it to you. It took a very long time to get it. The idea of 1 day delivery was unimaginable. And it might have to be the case that 1 day delivery becomes a thing of the past yet again. becomes once again something unimaginable because it's putting too much pressure on the logistics system. And that's kind of where we're at right now. Now, Daily Wire also said this. They said, rail strike threat returns as union rejects the latest offer. So they've rejected this first offer, right? It says it's about attendance policies, sick time, fatigue, the lack of family time, a lot of these things that cannot be seen but are felt by our membership. It's destroying their livelihoods. Again, they have their valid points, folks. Now, that's the representative of the rail industry. And it says further in, the attendance policy, which is the main thing they're pushing for, is what they call the attendance policy. Let me explain what that is. It says the attendance policy has been a major focus of the union. The deal offered that's basically the one where they want, more sick leave and so on, right? The deal offered to union workers also included a 24% pay increase by 2024, and also updates for workers for healthcare appointments, unless Congress intervenes, which they might do, and I'll get into that in a minute, or a new deal is struck before the deadline, workers could strike. Representative Rick Crawford, a Republican from Arkansas, a top Republican of the House subcommittee that includes railroads, spoke out against the potential union strike. And he said, look, what a terrible Christmas gift that would be to give to the American people at this point, right before Christmas, shutting down our supply chains. He said that to Politico. And he continued stating, so we've got something prepared if necessary, but I'm hoping it's not necessary. And folks, that's going to be the big thing. I'll get into that in a minute. They might end up taking congressional action to basically override a union strike and make such a strike illegal. If that happens, you can only do so much to force people to work. It's going to raise the point at that stage. Is it the unions telling them they have to do it, or is it the people themselves saying they don't want to basically go to work unless they get this? You might have people quit their jobs. This could be the death blow, essentially, to the system. This could be the death blow to the rail industry. And it's going to look really bad on the Democrats especially, because even though Republicans are getting behind it as well, the Democrats are the ones who are the majority, and also that they're the ones who kind of really campaign on the idea of being pro-union, and they get a lot of campaign money for it. This is a very interesting position for things to be in right now. Now, we'll get into that in a minute, folks. So first, though, we do have a sponsor today. Today's episode is brought to you by Secure. Over 155 million Americans are affected by data leaks in 2020. The average American had their personal data stolen about 4 times over the year. People get anxious because they can't protect their online data and activity. But now there's a new email and messenger app called Secure, that's Secur, that can give privacy and security for sending emails and messages. Secure's server and data center are hosted in Switzerland, which has the strictest data privacy laws in the world. Secure does not rely on big tech companies like Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, which also means it's not subject to the Intrusive Cloud Act. Secure does not ask for your phone number, mine your data, or ask for your contacts. Folks, it's only $5 for the messenger, $7 for the email, or $10 for the email and messenger package. You can visit secure.com today for a free 7-day trial, or you can use the promo code Joshua to get 25% off. And folks, big thanks out to Secure for sponsoring today's episode. Now, deeper into this. Again, it sounds like the government does have a plan in place to prevent a strike, at least based on what the union members have said, and it looks like they're going to do this. I should mention, frankly, it looks like congressional action to force people to basically override the unions, prevent a strike from happening, and force the workers basically to keep working regardless of what the unions say. It looks like they might do it, and not only that, but again, it's technically bipartisan. Technically, it looks like Republicans would also vote for it. We'll see how they want to play it strategically. They'll probably vote for it. And it's going to be a very difficult point for Democrats because Democrats do have the majority, and the blame is going to be on them. Even if Republicans do get behind it, they're going to get the blame also. The other issue too is, if it doesn't address the quality of life issues, a lot of people are ready to quit. The unions have, even though they are doing it like right before Christmas, and they're doing it in a way that's going to probably hurt a lot of American people, they have their valid points. Let's just be honest, right? The quality of life issues are very rough for them. The scheduling is very rough. just like you have with the truckers. You have issues with truckers as well, where they're putting new restrictions in place in California and so on, new monitoring programs. They have like tickers that just monitor them constantly. It's very hard. It's very hard to work like that. It's very hard to live like that. And you have people who are getting burned out. You have people getting treated like machines, and they're getting burned out. Now, the question is, can they fix these problems in a way that balances it? That's going to be the challenge. Now, the strike is about getting more paid days off, fixing their newly installed point system, which subtracts points every time they miss work, which is part of the problem as well. Again, I mentioned these like tracking systems and monitoring systems. It's very hard for them to live like that. Regardless of the reason, basically, you also have the issue of COVID and so on, people needing doctor's appointments and all that. A bit more on this, folks. Breitbart is saying that railway strike, this is their article, railway strike seen as increasingly inevitable threatens to derail the economy ahead of the holidays. Basically just laying out the issue we discussed, that the timing of this is very bad for the country and it's probably going to hit very hard. Rail line companies seem to be using the fact that Congress can, which is what I'll get into in a minute, can and very likely will force this through and override the unions, intervening to prevent a strike by as a leverage in their negotiations, meaning they might make a deal to avert the need for that. I personally think it might head in that direction rather than Congress having to override them entirely. But again, this is bad for Democrats. And again, the rail unions know this is bad for Democrats, meaning both sides, kind of like what they call like a Mexican standoff. Both sides have their guns pointed, and both sides know they have a pretty good upper hand in some regard. Now, the question is, could Congress move on the rail workers? What could they do about it? Let me explain that. American Prospect said this. They said, will Congress shut down rail workers' collective bargaining? They're saying Congress could end talks and strikes and worker lockouts by passing a joint resolution. That is under the Railway Labor Act of 1926, which is then sent to President Biden's desk, meaning Biden would actually have to sign on it, meaning, again, the Democrats would take the fall for it. They would take the blame for it. If Biden were to sign that, if Congress were to pass this and override the unions, the resolution could force workers to accept the contract approved by the Presidential Emergency Board, the board set up by the president to mediate the dispute. I mentioned before that the Biden administration actually did mediate a previous deal, which was actually decent. The unions turned it down. The deal was actually decent. Will everybody accept it? Probably not. Some will, some won't. Now, further in it states, approximately 84% of Class 1 railroad workers are unionized, yet a high rate of unionization has not prevented Wall Street, as the Prospect previously reported, from pushing the industry to strip rail capacity through extreme consolidation and the industry's version of just-in-time delivery. I mentioned like one-day shipments, right? Unheard of before. Which is precision scheduled railroading as well. You have to think of what it takes for a logistical system to be able to handle one-day deliveries in the way that it does right now. Wall Street's titanic financial incentives have been the backdrop as financiers have spent less money on running railroads and improving worker benefits for the sake of stock buybacks and dividends. Which, in other words, they've made all these new ways of doing things, all these new expectations, all these new forms of pressure, all this stuff, right? But the systems to support the actual workers have not kept pace with that. Again, it's a very valid point that, again, they're being overworked and they're having a very hard time with it. Now, folks, a bit more on this. The only reason this is possible is that the Railway Labor Act governs transportation workers. Under the law, this article says, workers cannot freely engage in collective bargaining for their jobs and often must accept whatever scraps the dominant corporations offer. However, while the law presents the problem, Congress must act to pass the resolution, and the president must sign it. So the choice is in the hands of the current Democratic majority, meaning It is on their heads, and it's not going to be good for them no matter which way this goes, frankly. And again, it's very much like the book. It's a great book if you haven't read it. Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand. It's a thick book actually, but basically, Atlas Shrugged. It's a fiction, right? It's like a libertarian fiction. It lays out this story of railroad owners. This whole idea of I care about it because it's mine. This idea of personal ownership. And how people value things when it's theirs. They take responsibility for it. It reflects on them, and it means something, right? They talked about the looters, the people, the government regulations that come in, even some of the unions to some extent. The people who come in and basically loot. And, Ayn Rand being very libertarian, was on the side more that taxation is basically theft. I would agree to some extent. I think to some extent we need it, but unless we're going to have complete anarchy or like anarcho-capitalism or something like that, which I don't think would be sustainable personally. But believe what you would like. That's my opinion. Ayn Rand was on that side of it, and basically the idea that these pressures, these people who steal from essentially the people who do the actual work and have the ownership and make things work, that they put these additional pressures in the system. There's a breaking point with that. You can only push things so far before the people who run these things and do it because they care about it and do it because they take ownership of it. The people who take ownership and they say, this is mine and I will make it work because it represents what I am. You can only take so much from them before they say, you know what, I'm not going to do it. And when they say they're not going to do it, the people who hold up the sky, just like Atlas in Greek mythology, shrug their shoulders and the sky comes tumbling down. That's essentially where things are at with the pressures that have been placed on these industries and the pressure placed on them. The pillars are about to be pulled apart, much like Hercules tearing down the pillars and, the temple falling down around him. Or Samson, sorry. We're entering a stage like this. And again, it's a very difficult point right now because while the Democrats do have the supermajority, and while you can argue how valid some of the victories were, they have to take the blame for it. They've put themselves in the place of the fall guy. They're going to be held responsible for any problems that take place. You want to sit in the throne of the king, you're going to be responsible for what happens in the kingdom. And we're at a point right now where there's a lot of dang problems in the kingdom. Who's going to be responsible for it? The people who took the seat. This is the position they're in. And through that, too, they could lose the support of one of their main bases, the unions. If they override the unions, and it's not just the rail unions, it's many unions vote heavy Democrat or heavily donate to them, the teachers union being probably the biggest one. If they anger the unions, they're going to lose a huge pillar of their support. Yeah, again, even if it's bipartisan, even if Republicans vote for it because the Democrats hold the seat and Biden has to sign off on it, it's going to fall on them. It's a difficult place for him to be in. All right, folks, that said, I'm going to jump into what's happening with Musk's culture war. For this, though, we're going to jump over to Epic TV because I'm going to walk a fine line on censorship, and frankly, I don't plan on censoring myself with it. So let's jump over to Epic TV where we won't be censored. Those of you on YouTube, please come join us on Epic TV. Get a free trial. Come check out the conversation. It's always great. I want to go over some of the really wild stuff happening on Twitter, including, for example, how Musk has been going after child pornography accounts. And many of those accounts just so happen to be Antifa accounts. And some of the wild stuff happening with that. And also the people attacking Musk for this and threatening to burn down Tesla stores. There's some crazy stuff happening right now, and I haven't seen a lot of coverage on it, to be honest. Come join us on Epic TV. First, though, folks, again, we have a new documentary actually premiering right now as we speak. It's called The Shadow State. And this is a documentary about... I'm not part of this. I'm part of some of the ideas on this. Actually, maybe we'll go over a little bit of Musk before we jump over. I'll go over some of it before we jump over. I'll show the trailer in a minute, but let me talk about Musk a bit because I do want to cover some of this for the folks on YouTube. Let's start off with a familiar face, folks. How many of you remember Monica Lewinsky? The woman who who Bill Clinton did not have sexual relations with, as you remember he stated. And then it turned out he did in the Oval Office. Long history, won't get into that. But regardless of that, she's for some reason back in the headlines, and she's on Twitter right now. And she posted a poll on Twitter. And she was asking whether Twitter employees or public polls should be used for important decisions on the platform. The context of this is important. Musk has been using public polls, on Twitter, saying, should he give Trump back his Twitter account? And people voted to give Trump back his Twitter account. Musk gave Trump back his Twitter account. Should he offer a general amnesty for banned accounts? People voted yes, he gave it back. Musk is ironically playing into the true democracy type, standard. The will of the people. If you're there to vote, do it. If you're not there to vote, then go away. Your vote doesn't count. And a lot of people on the left who argue, ironically, for pure democracy seem to have a problem with this. Monica Lewinsky's poll turned in the opposite way I think she expected, where people voted against her. But the poll actually showed and voted heavily against her, notably. But the poll actually showed something else entirely, and it's that something else that I think is actually more important. I'll show you her Twitter page. She noted something interesting. She said, here's the bummer of the new algorithms unleashed, or at least seemingly new. Never before have I had 2 times the comments versus likes, and most of these comments are negative. Why is that significant? What she's saying right now is that for the first time that she has personally seen on Twitter, she's getting a lot of negative comments. She's getting more comments than she's getting likes, and people are able to essentially criticize her. You see this happening not just with Monica Lewinsky, but with a lot of online influencers. They're suddenly being barraged. They're facing a barrage of negative comments, of people criticizing them, of people fact-checking them, because funny enough, Twitter, Musk had nothing to do with this one. But Twitter, right before Musk bought it, implemented a new community-based fact-checking system. Even myself, I was thinking, oh man, here we go again, community fact-checking. We know what that means, right? Now that Musk basically opened up the platform, it's a legitimate community fact-checking system. Biden is getting fact-checked by people. A lot of people are getting fact-checked by it. And people who were used to essentially, sitting in the ivory tower, so to speak, and being able to preach to the masses from the ivory tower, they're suddenly finding that the people are, saying the emperor has no clothes, essentially. The people are pointing out, I disagree with you, this is why you're wrong, and sometimes just hurling insults, which is not the nicer side of it. But regardless, what this is showing us is something important. Because people are saying that this is showing us what Twitter is like, that Twitter is becoming a hostile environment, it's becoming toxic. What you're seeing is not just Twitter. Twitter has enough users where it can give kind of a general pulse of essentially the culture of the country. This is showing us what public opinion is like. This is not just Twitter, this is public opinion. What you're witnessing on Twitter is the bubbling up of public opinion, the voices that have been silenced finally being able to speak out. And the public opinion, essentially, when Twitter is not filtering it, and the people who are used to being able to state things and feeling like they have the ability to dictate things and dictate public opinion, are suddenly finding they no longer have the influence nor the support that they believed they did. It is peeling away some of the illusions. The veil of Mara is suddenly vanishing, and people are seeing now the reality of the situation. They do not have the support they believed they had. People disagree with them, and they're going to have to see what people who disagree with them are saying. For a lot of them, this is a wake-up call, and a lot of them really, really don't like it. Now, Musk looks like he's becoming more aware of something interesting as well. Musk is becoming aware. And you remember Musk? Musk said he voted for Biden. He's not like a hard-line Republican. He's now suggesting he will vote for Trump, but he said he voted for Biden. He voted for Obama. He was a Democrat essentially, although I'd say he's probably more libertarian. Musk is becoming aware now of the culture war, which is kind of what the main thing I want to unravel today. Musk is becoming aware there's a culture war in this country, but one side of that debate has basically been silenced, and the other one has been allowed to dominate because the other side has been basically silenced. You've had an imbalance in terms of public awareness and public, free speech and people's ability to, I think actually play to even have the debate that the country needs to have, essentially. And he's realizing that, frankly, Twitter is going to be the place to have that debate. Musk tweeted this out. He said, "What do you think of the culture war?" It's a tweet he made. And if you read the comments on it, it was very interesting. I was not interested in Twitter pretty much since January 6th, and they deleted like 20,000 of my followers. And I'm still to this day, if you look at, you can use programs to see if you're like shadow banned and stuff. I'm still like relatively shadow banned on Twitter. I was tweeting at Musk hoping he could like do something about it, but he hasn't responded to me. I'm still shadow banned enough where I don't see a whole lot of use in posting there. But regardless of that, I've been interested in kind of looking through things and seeing what the general debate is right now. And I've been watching it with a lot of interest. The comments responding to Elon Musk are really interesting. Yes, you have some people who are being offensive, and they're on both sides of the aisle. It's not like one side is more offensive than the other. They're both, people are angry on both sides. It just happens. But the important part is not that. The important part is the legitimate debate taking place, in my opinion. You have a very lively debate outside of the insult sphere and so on culture, values, politics, pretty much every issue the country is divided on. And basically, these debates that are now taking place are things that we were not allowed to have before because of the way these platforms have been set up, because of censorship. Americans, and frankly most of the world, because these are globalist platforms at this point, have not been able to have the debate we need to have as a country. We have not been able to have the debate that would allow for the golden mean, that centrist position, where we start realizing, okay, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe the other side has some valid points. Maybe we can have a real debate and we can find some common ground. We've not been able to have that. And because we've not been able to have it, that middle ground has become a big area of conflict. It's very hard these days to talk to people on the opposite side of the aisle. It's very hard these days to talk to your cousin, sitting at the Thanksgiving table who's on the other side of the political spectrum, because we don't have that middle ground through which to have the debate. There's no mediating factor for it. Twitter is now restoring that. Twitter, to an extent, is bringing back this marketplace of ideas where people of different viewpoints are having that debate. And that is the center of this new culture war taking place right now. The significance of this can't be understated. And it's interesting as well that basically that's what they're trying to shut down. Musk is also becoming aware of this. Let me show you one of his own responses as apparently he's been reading some of these tweets. Musk said this. Musk said, "I am neither conventionally right nor left, but I agree with your point. The woke mind virus," suggesting wokeism is basically a mind virus. Some people say it's a religion. He's saying mind virus has thoroughly penetrated entertainment and is pushing civilization towards suicide. There needs to be a counter narrative. And folks, this has gone into several points. Musk is saying it will be necessary. Musk is actually doing something extremely interesting now. That as essentially a cleansing of the woke mind virus that has basically had a monopoly on information. They've been able to censor people. I mean, one of the reasons why Epic Times, we had to go build our own Epic TV platform was because of this censorship. Because if I were on YouTube, I'd be out of work. I'd be begging for money on the street probably. If we didn't build our own platform, I'd do something else because I wouldn't be able to do this for a living. Maybe I'd do it as a hobby or something. But, the censorship establishment will cancel you if you talk about a lot of things. You can't, for a long, and it changes, of course, but I could not talk about virus origin. I could not talk about efficacy of vaccines. There's many political issues, January 6th and so on, I could not talk about. There's a lot of stuff that the country needs to talk about that you cannot say on social media. And if you want to have a business and so on, or you want to be a news outlet, you're going to get kicked off. You're going to get kicked off for engaging in the topics that need to be talked about. Musk is doing something extremely interesting right now, which is a way of essentially cleansing this movement that took place, of cleansing what he calls the woke mind virus. He's going to be releasing information. He's talking, for example, about releasing information on how Twitter, because remember, when Musk bought Twitter, he didn't just buy Twitter. He also bought everything that people gave to Twitter, including the direct messages, including the emails and discussions between Twitter employees and the federal government. Musk owns that now. And he's saying he's going to make some of that public. He's saying he's going to make a lot of it public. Musk is saying, as one example of this, he's going to show the public how the Hunter Biden laptop story was censored. He's going to be showing the public, he says, I'll get into it, but he's going to be showing people essentially all the stuff that has been happening behind the scenes that we suspected was happening, but did not know for sure. I'll show you one more point before we jump over to Epic TV. Elon Musk said this: the Twitter files on free speech suppression, soon to be published on Twitter itself. The public deserves to know what really happened. And folks, this is in addition to what Musk had already started on Twitter. I'm going to get more into it because this is just the tip of the iceberg. Things are getting interesting. That said, folks, let's jump over to Epic TV, exclusively speaking of censorship and having to build their own platforms. Again, come join us there. It's great discussion, great community here. Come join us, folks, if you haven't yet. Before we jump over, though, let me show you a trailer. Again, we have a new documentary premiering right now as we speak, The Shadow State, about environmental social governance, which is kind of the public-private system of enforcing socialism, ironically through corporations. Who would have thought? Let me show you this trailer. It's premiering right now as we speak, actually. Then we'll jump over to Epic TV exclusively. We'll jump over to that now.
In America, politics and business are two separate worlds. Politicians make laws, CEOs make profits. But now, that's all changing. A movement has been growing to unite corporations, governments, and global institutions. Its purpose is to deal with issues like climate change, racism, inequality, and gun control. It is called ESG. How does it work? And how will it change our lives? Are we bending Wall Street to our will, or are we the ones who will be manipulated?
All right, again, folks, don't miss it. It's on Epic TV exclusively. It's called The Shadow State, premiering right now as we speak. So maybe watch it after this show. How about that? All right, folks, yeah, don't miss it. That says jump over exclusively to Epic TV, and I will see you there. Thank you. And, folks, thank you so much for being here, as always. Those of you curious, by the way, I'm drinking actually matcha today.